Hey everyone, thanks for joining our live. My name is Luis Cara. I'm a portrait photographer, portrait and fashion photographer based in Dallas, Texas. And today we're gonna do some retouching of a photo. I'm gonna guide you through my process from start to finish. I usually start with frequency separation. I do some details, dodge and burn locally. I do dodge and burn globally as well. Then I focus on details like enhancing the eyes or the sharpness, and then we'll go through color grading as well. So thanks again for asking, for attending. I'm sorry because we were a little bit late, but thanks for your patience, and we're gonna start soon. So here on the screen, you can see a photo that I took a little while ago here at the studios at Maker's Gym. You see here Katie Colbert. She really nailed it. We shot actually at Studio B. We use a bunch of Nanlite lights in the background to create those gradients for light and to create this particular profile. I shot this image a little bit underexposed. The reason why was just because I didn't want to wash out the colors. If you see my stories on my Instagram or my post on my Instagram, you can see the setup that I used. And I didn't really wanted to wash out the colors in the background. So I did a little bit underexposed, but we'll recover all of that detail so that the photo looks amazing. There are some challenges that I see here in this photo that I'm gonna try to cover with you. The first one is this, again, it's a little bit underexposed. Then other things that I can see here, for example, is that we can see a shadow on her forehead. We're gonna take care of that. We're gonna make sure that we retain all the detail on the texture without like smoothing the texture of her skin. Nothing at all. We're gonna retain all the texture. And we're gonna play with these colors. I had like different lights. I had a red or magenta light coming from the bottom. I had a teal light coming from the top, and you can see those transitions of colors here in her face. And we're gonna learn, or I'm gonna try to show you how I do it in terms of like how can we even out the transition between these colors. I open my image in Capture One. That's my first step. That's part of my process. That's how I do it. We have several icons here at the top side of the screen, top left of the screen. And the first one that I usually come to is this one right here, the exposure. And in the exposure, I'm gonna try to align it to and recover the details so that I can have a base photo to start working with. So in this case, I think I'm just gonna start playing with exposure a little bit. I think this image might be probably half a step down. So I'm gonna probably add half a step on it, and you can see right away it starts becoming more into life. I don't add too much brightness or exposure to it since my process and my color grading at the end of the day keeps adding light to it in layers. So if I do that, if I expose it correctly right out of the bat, it's probably gonna be overexposed at the end. So bear with me. It's not like a one touch retouch and then you do it all and then you can have it ready. It's a multiple layer approach, and I hope I can show you exactly how I do it in this live stream. The next one I'll probably take. Let me actually zoom back a little bit. The next slider that I'm probably gonna take, I wanna adjust a tiny bit of the brightness in this case. So by clicking my arrow up on my keyboard, I can increase the values, and you can see how they start going up here on this specific slider. One thing that I really like about Capture One is that if you click on these sliders, it kind of show you what it was the original value, so you know what adjustment is doing what. So now I'm increasing a little bit of light, in this case exposure and brightness, but I feel like it's getting a little bit washed out. So on this photo in particular, what I can do is just probably add a tiny bit of saturation. So probably somewhere around 10 might be good for me on this one. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit just to see if you can appreciate it better. but this was before and after saturation. So it's light, but I think it's really powerful. There are other controls in here that I usually use to get to that baseline. Again, some of those could be highlights. If I had like too much highlights in my photo, or things that would bother me, like for example on this side of the umbrella on the right side, I could probably adjust the highlights in here. This is not too much for me. I don't think it's like overexposed. I can live with that. It doesn't bother me at all. There are other sliders that I like to touch. In this case, for example, I like clarity too. Make sure you don't abuse this slider, which is sometimes what some people do. This slider usually will get you a pretty rough skin. So I just exaggerated right now, and I added 100 to took it all to 100, and you can see what it looks like. So it adds some definition, but sometimes people try to make their image sharper by using clarity, which shouldn't be the case. It should be just maybe like to make it pop a little bit. So you can see here, it's just like small adjustments, but in different layers are gonna make a big difference. Let's see. On this image as well, I was using a beauty dish with a diffuser. So I would probably like if her face was a little bit more lit. And in this case, we have some tools here again on Capture One. I can show you how to do it on Photoshop as well, but Capture One makes it really easy for us and on how to do it. And they have like these brushes here on the top menu, and it says like Draw Mask. So if I click that control, it brings up this cursor, and I'm just gonna zoom up again. This cursor, and what I'm gonna do is just like start painting, and it's not showing anything just now, but it's actually painting a mask. If I hit M on my keyboard, it's gonna show the mask of where I'm painting it, and basically what I want to do is just create some light or add some light to her face to make it pop a little bit and separate her from the rest of the image. It doesn't have to be like super perfect, because what I'm about to do now is just I'm gonna modify this mask with something called Luma Range. And with the Luma Range, what I'm gonna try to do is just like focus on the parts of her face that includes the most light and try to enhance that a little bit. So how do we do that? Now that I draw the mask, you can see that mask painted here in red. If I go here to Luma Range, we're gonna see these sliders over here. And if we start playing with these sliders, moving these sliders to the right, you can see how this mask starts to modify, to change. So if we keep moving to the right, you can see how this mask is gonna just select the portions that are brighter on her face. But now we see like these transitions here on the mask are a little bit rough. So to ease that a little bit, we can pull this little marker on the bottom left, and if we pull it or make it longer to the left, it creates a better transition on the mask itself. So I'm just gonna leave it like that. I'm gonna show you what it looks like. So I'm gonna go and hit apply. The mask is what it's showing right now. So I'm gonna click M again just to make it disappear. And now that I have a mask, it created an adjustment layer here on top of my background image. And what I can do that is now apply some adjustments into that specific mask. And what we were trying to do again was just try to add a little bit more brightness or light into her face. So we can do that pretty much very easy here on the brightness slider, and I'm just gonna exaggerate it so you can see. These are gonna be the portions of the image that are gonna be affected. And we're just gonna do it slightly, not too much. We can always do back and forth on this one and check how much it would be too much. So probably around 6. For me, I think this image would be pretty cool. So let me zoom back for a minute. All right, so we have here the image. If I go ahead and click Y now on my keyboard, Y will show you the before. And if you click Y again, it will actually show you the after. So before and after, before and after. So you can see right off the bat, these are some adjustments that we can do so that we can get like a really easy and nice base image to it, so that we can start working on Photoshop. And on Photoshop, we're going to do all of the different techniques that we cannot do in these programs, like frequency separation or dodge and burn. We have more tools, and it's going to be easier to do that on Photoshop itself. I encourage you to try this program. It has a 30-day free trial, so you can actually download it. You can open your images here, start looking at the colors, and what can you do with it. The color management is really nice. They have a basic color editor, so you can play with basic colors. In this case, for example, if you wanted to enhance purples or oranges, you can do it in here if you wanted to. There are some advanced controls in which you can pick the color that's going to be affected, for example. And then you can, of course, play with this smoothness, hue, saturation, lightness. And this one is really powerful too for the skin tones. So the skin tones, you would select basically the skin of the person, and then you can try to make it like change like the hue, saturation, lightness, or you can actually try to make it more uniform. I usually don't do my skin tone correction on Capture One Pro. I like to use Photoshop more. I do it via curves, but that doesn't mean this one is not good. I'm not gonna do it on this one because, as you can see, my light setup is making her skin be red, orange, blue, different colors, which was the purpose of doing this photo with colors. So we're gonna do that in Photoshop in a minute. So once again, I'm going to show you the before and after by hitting Y. So that's before. This is the after. And what we can do now is just go ahead and right click on this image. We're going to say edit with, and it's already connected with Photoshop. So when we do that, it's just going to ask you a bunch of things. Like you have the format over here, for example. You can decide if you want it to be 16-bit or 8-bit. 8-bit is usually enough, especially for photos outdoor. I like to use 16-bit, especially if I have complex gradient in the background. Otherwise, I would use 8-bit. But in this case, I'll do 16-bit. And what it's going to do is just going to open an image, and it's just going to open a PSD format of that image. So the things in here, like it's going to respect the crop or how you want it. If you wanted scale, I want to use the original size, which is fixed 100%. So you click here, edit variants, and what's going to do is just open a copy of that image into Photoshop. If I look back, then when I save it, it's just gonna appear here on Capture One again. But yeah, now I have it here in Photoshop, and this is our base image that we worked on Capture One. I'm just gonna pause for a minute and see if anyone has any questions. Looks like we're good. All right, so my first step in here is frequency separation. And frequency separation is a very powerful tool or technique that can help you retouch your photo in a really powerful way. So what frequency separation does is it separates the tones or the colors of your photo from the texture. So that means that you can play pretty much with the colors, the shadows, the different hues. You can play with the transitions between shadows and light. You can reshape the light as well using colors without affecting the textures. This will help you so that your skin is not all smooth and fake looking. This technique is not only for skin. This technique can be applied to everything. You can apply it to clothing to remove wrinkles, for example. You can apply it to remove different, again, tones, shadows, light in clothing. You can use it for food. You can use it for cars. You can use it everywhere. So the idea here today is to show you how I use frequency separation in persons. It would be exactly the same way to do it in anything else. But today we're going to try to show you how I do it. And frequency separation, I have an action that I built myself. And frequency separation, what it does, it will create two layers. One layer is going to be the tones, and you get that layer by adding a filter to the photo that will blur basically all the texture that's on it. So now this is a key step. So you'd say, like, how many points or how many pixels should I select for my photo? And this is crucial. And sometimes people just say, like, oh, I just hit like a random value, or I read somewhere in the internet that it was 16, for example. And this radius is always very specific to the photo that you're working. And it will be different if the photo, for example, is on a close-up, or if it's like a 3/4 body, or it's a full body. If it's like too far away, you would need less radius. If it's like a close-up or beauty shot, you probably would need a lot more radius. The key, or the thing that will make you decide on your radius, is to start dragging this slider for the radius until you stop seeing the texture. You start blurring out the texture until you start blurring out hair, for example, or the texture on the clothing. So for me, let me do the preview. So it shows. It's being a little bit laggy, but give it a minute. It's not showing. Let me just run it one more time. I'm going to delete these two layers, run my action again, and hopefully it's going to show here on the preview. All right, it looks like the monitor is tripping probably. Oh, there you go. So now the preview is showing, and you can see that at this level of 16, probably I'll do a tiny bit less, probably something around 12. This level of zoom, of radius, it should remove, or you should see all blurred out the texture of her skin, and you should see blurred out all of these little flyaways that are around her face, and for example this portion. And what the thing that's gonna tell you when to stop is when you see all this texture blurred out, but you can still see the facial expression well defined. So you can see here the corners of the mouth, you can see the edges of the mouth, you can see the definition of the nose, the eye sockets, the eyebrows. So that's where you stop on doing this. For me, I think for this image, it would work nicely, probably something about 12, 13. I think I'm gonna go with 13. And when I click OK, my action will actually create these 3 layers. But I'm gonna show you what it does. This was the first layer. Sorry about that, I think it's tripping. There you go. This is the tones layer, which basically, as we said, we created this blur layer on it. My action used median, filter called median on the noise menu. You can also use noise and scratches, dust and scratches. I mean, that's also a good one. Gaussian blur is very popular, but I think that's the least effective. So if you're using Gaussian blur, you should probably switch it to one of the twos that I just mentioned. Then the texture layer. Let me show you what the texture layer looks like. The texture layer is basically an apply image filter, and what it's gonna do is just extract all that texture from the tones. So here you can see all the different edges, the texture of her skin, the hair, everything that has edges and is like sharp on the image is gonna live here. So we have these two together in this folder, and the whole idea is for us to start working on the tones, to get rid of colors that we don't want, to push light into shadow or shadow into light, and then on the texture we can work to remove like skin imperfections, pimples, or flyaways and things like that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start working on the tones layer. And on the tones layer, there are two ways that I usually do it. One is the mixer brush tool, and the other one is the lasso tool. Right now, I'm gonna use the mixer brush tool. The mixer brush tool, what it does is that it's gonna help you, like if you were painting with oil paints and then you grab color from one of the from one of the color palettes and then you drag it into your painting. This is pretty much what the mixer brush tool would do. So what we can do on that layer without affecting the texture is actually, I'm gonna get rid of this shadow, for example. Oops. The return that this monitor is giving me is messing me up a little bit. Let me try to see if I can switch the color output on the displays. All right, yeah, that has a better refresh. Okay, so what we're gonna try to do here on the tones layer is to push this color, this lighter color, into this darker area, so that we can get rid of the shadow, but without affecting the texture that's on top of it. So I would use the mixer brush tool to push that color into this one. So I will do it just by start dragging from up into the shadow portion. And then I can also do it from the bottom side of things. I'm using a tablet, by the way. I think using a tablet or somewhere that you can draw would make your life way easier rather than using a mouse directly. Just because I feel it feels more natural. This is basically like painting or drawing on top of it. And what I'm doing is, again, I'm using this tool to pretty much push the color that I want into the color that I don't want. So pretty much the lighter color, what I did, into the shadow. So let me do a before and after really quick. Before and after. We're just getting rid of that shadow in there. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna zoom. So you can see how the texture on her forehead is actually untouched. So that's a powerful thing about frequency separation, that you can basically play with all these tones. And you can see here, we probably can do a little bit more to try to even out this shadow over here. And probably this darker tone over there is bothering me a little bit. And what we can do is just push a little bit of color, lighter color into it. Another example that I can show you is that if, for example, you wanted to make these darker to make it look fuller, for example, you can actually drag this darker color into this lighter color. I'll show you in a little bit what it looks like. I'm basically dragging the darker color into the lighter color, and it's just making it a little bit fuller. Like that, without even touching the hair. I'm not deleting hairs. It doesn't look like smooth out or anything, because this is not touching any texture. Of course, it will depend always if you are selecting the right radius. So remember, when you're setting your radius for frequency separation, you need to make it consciously to the point where you don't see the texture anymore, and then stop. Some other portions that I could apply this technique into it, specifically for this image, could be this lighter area into this darker area. Probably I can ease the transition on those. Probably I can do the same over here. It looks a little bit more red that I would like, and this looks lighter. So probably I can try to ease the transition. I could try to ease the transition in here too, so that it looks like more smooth in terms of the transition. So I'm gonna do the other technique now, so that I can show you. And the lasso tool technique, usually what it does is I'm gonna just select areas that share the different colors that I kind of wanna ease into. So for example, I'm selecting here lighter color and a little bit of the darker color. If I go ahead here and click blur now, Gaussian blur, and I apply the exact same radius that I did when I was setting up my frequency separation, this will give me a nice blur on the tones only to ease out this part of the colors that are underneath her, the texture of her skin. I'm gonna do before and after really quick so you can see what was the difference. So we did the top part with mixer brush trying to push out the color, and then we create a nicer transition in this part of her face using the lasso tool. Here probably I can try to use the lasso tool as well. So I do a selection over there, and Gaussian blur is now on Command F for me. So now it's easier for me to do it as a shortcut, and I just can click it a couple times. And that should smooth out that portion as well. So as you can see, there are different portions of the area of the face or your subject or your image where you can apply these different techniques. It will depend on what makes you feel more comfortable. Both of them need practice. It's not easy just to come out of the bat and expect that the results are like there. But with a little bit of practice, you should be pretty much on the other side. I'm gonna switch back to the mixer brush tool to try to push lighter color into this portion of her face a tiny bit. There you go. I'm gonna probably try to ease out these colors over here. Now I'm gonna use the other technique. Select with lasso tool and then Gaussian blur. Again, it's on my shortcut, so I'm clicking Command F on my keyboard. Command F on my keyboard. And these will pretty much let me ease out the colors on her face. So I'm gonna zoom back for a minute, because I wanna show you now that we made all of these adjustments just on the color layer. If I do before and after, this is how far this has taken us. So when you are when you have practiced a little bit with this technique, this can take you like really short time to do. So probably for me, working on this image in the frequency separation side of things, it would take me probably 5 minutes. You know, it takes experience at some point. So when you're starting, of course, it's going to take you more time. But don't let it go. If you keep practicing, practice makes progress. I always tell that to my kids. All right, so on the frequency separation side, I'm moving into the texture layer over here, and the texture layer, as we saw before, it will have basically all the skin texture. It will have things like these flyaways over here. It will have all of these smaller details, and when we work on the texture portion, the whole idea is for it to only affect the texture and not affect the tones or the hues that are underneath. So what I like to do here is either using the clone stamp tool or using the healing brush tool. You can heal or clone texture so that we erase things that we don't like, for example, that we want to replace. So in this case, if I wanted to get rid of this flyaway, for example, this hair over here, I can just paint with confidence that I'm not just gonna be, you know, changing the hues under her skin, because I'm just replacing texture or cloning texture from different sides. So again, this could be really easy. Right now I'm using the healing brush tool, but you can use clone. Let me see with clone, for example, just to do an example. I'm gonna hold here and then I'm gonna clone this texture. I'll make sure I'm on a 100% opacity. And then I'm just gonna clone that texture. Pretty much then you fix it. I don't like to do a lot. I think that at some point, leaving some imperfections make the image look more natural. So I wouldn't replace necessarily all the different imperfections and all the flyaways. There are some good flyaways, there are some bad flyaways, but most of these don't bother me. I probably have these over here that I can remove again with my clone stamp tool on the texture layer, and I'm basically taking the texture that's on the umbrella or in the background. I'm just applying it to where these flyaways are, and you can see them disappear really easy. Let me scan the image really quick for other portions of the texture that I would like to touch up. But as you can see, it's really easy. It's really straightforward. I'm just clicking and selecting my target area, and then I'm painting on top of these areas to pretty much replace the texture. This technique will help you to, like, if at some point you feel like you're missing texture in one area, but other parts of the face or other parts of your image has the texture that you want, and you think like, oh, this will look good, you can clone that texture into different places as well. You need to be aware of that because you wouldn't want to clone, like the skin has different types of texture, so you need to be very aware that if you're working here under her eye, you need to make sure that you clone texture that is similar. You wouldn't clone texture from here because it will look really weird. I can show you an example. If I was to clone texture from here and there, it adds a completely different texture that it's not representative of like natural eye texture, under the eye texture, I want to say. Let me go ahead really quick and clean this up. I'm using, again, the tablet point and click pretty much to remove all of these imperfections. Going around the face. When I teach these courses in my one-on-one, I always say that it's key for you to first look at your image before you're gonna work on it, because if I zoom in all the way in, I could probably lose myself trying to fix all these mini imperfections or these mini spots or pimples or whatever, and this could consume you. This could take you like hours to do. In my opinion, the best way to do is just think a little bit. How are you going to use your image? Are you going to print it? Are you going to use it for a magazine? Are you going to do like full close-up? Are you going to do beauty? Or is it just going to be for Instagram, for example? If it's for Instagram, well, keep in mind that the image you're going to probably use it like this at this level of zoom. So it wouldn't make sense for me to just go ahead and start working on details that are really, really, really small, because no one's going to see them anyway. So that will, if you think like that, that will save you hours of work. Check these little spots over here. Really quick. And you can see that at some point, even though I try to remove this pimple over here, it didn't do the job completely. And it didn't do it because I did replace the texture from here, but this still had some color underneath. And if you still see that problem, then you come back to your tones layer, and then like we did on the forehead, for example, we're just gonna push the color that we want. So in this case, the lighter color into that darker spot, and then you can see it really easily disappear. I'm just gonna do like one more extreme example for this purpose of showing you how powerful this thing can be. And I'm just gonna try to remove all of this stuff in here really quick. So I'm gonna start actually on the texture layer. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start cloning texture that I want. So texture from the umbrella pretty much. And then you can see how it starts disappearing. I mean, the texture starts disappearing. You still can see some color in there, but don't worry about that because we already know that the color is on a different layer, and we can attack that in just a minute. So basically what I'm doing is just removing all of the texture from this area that I want to basically get rid of. All of this area, probably even this guy, smaller. There you go. And now we're left with the tones in this portion. So what I'm gonna do now is just I'm gonna clone the color in this case. So on my color layer, what I'm gonna do is just go here and start cloning this background color on it. So you can see how everything starts disappearing. You are maintaining the texture from the umbrella, this nice grain that the photo has naturally, but without messing it out. I'm gonna zoom in here to make my brush smaller. And what I'm gonna do is just like copy, clone this color pretty much. Then I see these little details, so probably I can just, if they are not in the color, then they are in the texture, as you can see. So basically cloning this texture over here. Going back to the tones for this little piece. Okay, now if I zoom back and I want to know what I did right there, this was a change, I'm sorry. This was a change right there. So again, I think if I had only one tool to use in my whole retouch, I think it would probably be frequency separation. You can get really, really, really amazing results using this technique. For now, what we're gonna do is just move into the next step. The next step for me is dodge and burn. It's called local dodge and burn, and it's different from global dodge and burn. Just in terms of how you use it, the local dodge and burn, I use it for small details, like little marks that I wasn't necessarily able to fix with frequency separation, like little creases or little lines that might be darker or that might be lighter. And global dodge and burn, I will use it to try to create more dimension for the photo, try to make it more 3D, so enhancing the overall shape of the image. So let's jump right into the second step. I call it cleanup. I have an action here which creates a few layers that I usually use. This doesn't mean that you have to use all of them. Pretty much it's like an empty layer over here. I have this empty layer because I can clone things or fix things that I probably didn't do at the beginning, or if I'm having trouble with frequency separation and I want to try a different approach, I usually do it in this layer. Then I have a dodge and burn curves layers over here. Pretty easy to set up. The dodge, for example, is just this curve. It has a point here in the middle. And this output, instead of being at over here at 125, it goes all the way to 150. And the burn, what it does is the opposite, so it just brings it down. So if I was to invert my mask to show you what it does, that would be the dodge layer. And if I invert it on the burn, this would be the burn layer. So pretty much it's just like, it's like having one a little bit more exposed and the other one underexposed. What we're gonna try to do here is just now use our normal brush, our brush tool, and I'm gonna do opacity 100, and I'm gonna do flow on 3%. It's important, this setting is pretty important. I keep it at 3% my flow because what I wanna do is just paint on that little area that I'm having trouble with, and I want to build up as I paint. So as with every trace that I do, is just going to add 3% of whatever I have, of whatever adjustment I have on my dodge layer. So pretty much, I'm going to zoom in for a minute and see if I can see areas that might need that that treatment. And I'm going to show you a few, for example, that I would do. I see this little difference in here. Looks a tiny bit darker for me. or probably this area a little bit that I could play with. There are a few areas over here that I could make darker, for example. These probably I can make a little bit lighter, and I could go down here and I have like a few different areas over here that I could probably touch up a little bit. It doesn't need to be that much. I think it already looks pretty nice as it is. So what I'm gonna do is just, again, on my dodge layer, I'm gonna paint in this black mask. I'm gonna paint with white because the white is gonna reveal the adjustment that I have on the curves layer. If I was to paint in black, then I would hide that adjustment. So what I'm gonna do is just make my brush smaller, like kind of like the size of the imperfection or portion of the image that I want to hide, and I'm just gonna start painting on it a little bit. So again, every trace that I do is just gonna be 3%, keeps building up all the way to 100% of what I have on this layer. But just to give you an idea what I did, I painted really quick and I retouched or touched up these little details over here. This is what I called local dodge and burn. So basically I'm painting white in here, and if there were areas of the image where I wanted to make it darker to even out these areas or make them disappear, for example, these areas over here, I see them are a little bit lighter, or this area here next to the nose is a little bit lighter. I would use my burn layer to reveal an underexposed adjustment. So basically what it's gonna do is just gonna darken these areas. So I'm painting again with white on those lighter areas so that I can reveal that adjustment that I just did. It doesn't have to be that much. So now if I turn it on and off, it could become more evident of what we did. So again, think about your image and how you're gonna use it, and see how much of the detail you need. You know, there's people that spend so many hours working here on local dodge and burn. It's pretty fun, and you know, I can even see it as relaxing at some point. But when you have like a long list of photos to edit, this could be your worst nightmare at the same time. So I'm dodging a few of the areas over here. I'm just gonna turn it on and off so you can see really quick these adjustments that we did. I don't want to be I don't want to add too much into it, so just things that are getting my eye. For example, I'm just gonna burn this little portion over here. My wife always tells me, like, I don't know how you see those details. I guess it's just like when you keep working on these, your eye keeps getting a little bit trained on what you want to see or what you need to see in these cases. So for me, it's easier to already identify like a bunch of different places where I would dodge or I would burn an image. But the reality is that most people won't even notice. So there you go. Let me do a little bit more dodge, probably here on the right side, under her lip, tiny bit, and maybe burn a tiny bit under this next to it. Again, the goal is to try to ease out all of these little imperfections. If I do here before and after, you can see the things that we did. If I was to use this photo for a beauty magazine, like a full-blown close-up, then I would probably spend a lot more time, you know, fixing little details. But in my opinion, it doesn't need a lot of work in this dodge and burn portion of it. So let me scale back a little bit, and then we can see so far what we have is just the frequency separation and the cleanup portion of things. And that's the before, and that's the after. So far in my process, I probably spend about 10 minutes, I want to say. Usually my whole process takes me probably 20 minutes per image, depending on how complicated or challenging it is. If the person has a skin that's really rough or has like a lot of details, marks, pimples, or things like that, it could be more time consuming. But in average, I would say about 20-25 minutes tops on each image. All right. For purposes of this session, I'm only focusing on the face, but that doesn't mean you can just go and check the rest of the image. Like for example, I see a portion here, and I can show you how like, oh, this little portion over here, this little detail, I wanted to get rid of it, and I know that if I do my healing brush tool and I use all my layers in there, I can just really quick get rid of that thing. Get it out of the way, and probably that lives here. I wouldn't mind. You can do it the other way with the frequency separation as well, but I don't think for that specific detail it would make sense. Other places that I would probably play with Dutch and burn could be these ones. If you feel like wrinkles or portions of here, the hands are really evident in terms of like different colors, you can touch it up a little bit. I wouldn't do it that much because, for example, wrinkles on the fingers and creases and all that it's really natural to be like that. So just in case that it's like way too much, probably I would just jump into it and try to ease out a tiny bit of it. Okay, my next step now on my workflow would be global dodge and burn. So I have another action for that, which basically creates an empty layer, but it's on 50% gray. So you can create that over here, creating a new layer, and then selecting that 50% gray option checkbox. Let me just pause a little bit and see if there's a question here. Hey Duke, it says, would you normally have lighten up her hand as well as her face? Probably. I don't know if for this specific shot, I don't think so. What I wanted to do is light up the face specifically. For this shot, I want this to be the point of focus and drag the attention towards it. If I wasn't doing such dramatic or creative lighting, for example, yes, I would try to do it more consistent in the face, in the hands, or different parts of her body as well. All right, so I'm gonna jump now onto this one, and this one it's pretty fun to me. I really like it because this is what starts giving more dimension to your photo. It the whole idea is to try to make it more kind of like 3D looking. And what I mean with that is just having the light wrapping around your subject and create that volumetric shapes kind of thing. So I'm gonna first create here an empty layer because I want to show you which portions of her face or her body I'm gonna light up and which ones I'm gonna darken. So usually what I do is I use my normal brush, and I use it on opacity 5% and flow 100%. And usually what I do is I would add some light by just creating like little touches. So in this case, I would probably go from this big, and then I would start making my brush smaller to make another touch, and then I would make it to make another touch. And what I mean with that, for example, in the forehead, I'm just gonna create a new document really quick, and I'm gonna paint it with black. Now to exemplify what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to create a gradient using my brush. So what I mean when I say like, let me do more so you can see. 20% in this case. But what I want to do is just start with the outer portion and then make it smaller and do another, make it smaller and do another, make it smaller and do another. So pretty much what I'm doing here is creating some sort of like a sphere, and I would probably do that for the forehead. And for other parts of her face, like for example the nose, or if it was the arms or the legs, what I would do is just lines that would kind of create like a cylinder. So let's think about the nose, the bridge of the nose, for example. I will make a line first, and then I would make my brush smaller, and I would make another line on top, then smaller, and I would make another line on top, and smaller, and I'm gonna make another line on top. So kind of trying to do like some sort of like rough cylinder. You can see how the light starts bright at the center, and it starts like fading out a little bit. So what I'm gonna try to do is that specific technique, but now applied to her face. I'm gonna exaggerate first so you can see which portion of her face I'm gonna light up and which portions I'm gonna darken. So I would start lighting this portion up, as well as the nose, and people who's familiar with makeup would start seeing a pattern here of where usually I would try to darken the image or lighting the image a little bit, and these pretty much would be the areas that I would be adding light or I would be darkening a little bit. Same you can do on the hands, for example. So do it here, 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 here. Do it here, and then with black I would do this. So pretty much creating some contour. If she wasn't wearing these specific clothing and you could see more of her arm or her skin, I would probably do it in the arm as well. So I would probably do like a line like this, and then I would probably burn the sides so that it would create more like a volumetric shape. So this was a sample layer for you to see exactly what I'm gonna try to do. Forgot one, which will be here. On the chin, and probably since this image has this reflection, I will probably do something in there. So it should be also like pretty quickly. So going now on my actual layer, I'm gonna take my brush and I'm gonna do opacity 5%, flow 100%, and I'm just gonna zoom in for you to see better. So take my brush, I'm gonna start with the shape of the light, of course, with one bigger area, and then I'm gonna start making my brush smaller, and then I'm gonna do the same for the nose. 1, 2, probably do it here. 1, 2, probably following this highlight as well. 1, 2. I'm gonna do here on the chin. 1, 2. I'm gonna do here on the lips. 1, 2. And I'm gonna do it here on the outside. 1, 2. And then I'm gonna switch to black and I'm gonna paint on those areas that I told you. 1, 2. So bigger and then smaller and then smaller. Bigger and then smaller and then smaller. Smaller and then smaller. Bigger, smaller, smaller. So you kind of get the idea. I'm trying to do those shapes that I show you on the other file to try to create more definition. So right now, if I show you the before and after, it's just gonna look very exaggerated. So we're gonna tone down a little bit by changing the blending mode of this layer. But first I wanna show you what was the result of doing those things. So this is what it looks like when we are trying to add that volumetric definition into the image. Of course, this is at the beginning I do it like this, so it looks like a little bit exaggerated so that I actually know what I'm doing. And then I bring it back by changing my blending mode from overlay to soft light. And then if you feel that it's still too much, you could come here and probably dial down the opacity a little bit. So probably right there about 85 or 86. And that would essentially create a little bit more of a shape of the face. I can still see, probably didn't do enough of the mixer brush here, and I still see some sort of a shadow. So I can come here to the dodge, for example, layer, and I can paint a tiny bit on this one. Again, with 3 flow and 100% opacity. I'm just gonna paint really quick on that area where that shadow was. I think that's much better now. All right, so let's see this again. So this was the global dodge and burn. And let me do it really quick on the hands. I'm gonna add those 2 or 3 lines. So bigger, and then go smaller. Same for these fingers. And then I'm switching to black. Bigger to smaller, bigger to smaller. And then we'll see the change in there. All right, so if I was to now show you the change from these 3 layers, you can see how this image is coming to live with all of these images. It looks starting to look a lot more clean. So before and after, I'm gonna zoom really quick so you can see. You can see how we're preserving all of the texture in there, and then I'm gonna do before and after, before and after. So that's a global dodge and burn. Let me actually clean up this portion a little bit. I see a small shadow, so I'm gonna take again my dodge, local dodge, and I'm just gonna paint a tiny bit over here. There you go. All right, the next step would be, for me, would be start looking at the details. And for the details, for me, the most important part of a portrait, the way that I take them, is the eyes. I'm really looking for the connection of the eyes with the camera, so they can convey more emotion into it, and then I can communicate and make the image more powerful. So when I'm working on these details, I want to make sure that, for example, the eyes pop from the image, and would be probably the first thing that would drag your eyes when you're looking at my photos. And I do that by adding a little bit of sharpness. I do a little bit of dodge and burn, specifically to, it's like if you were adding micro contrast on the creases of the eyes, on the eyelashes, not on the eyelashes, on the eyebrows, and then I light up the eyes a little bit as well on a natural way. So let's check that out. That's the next step on my process. I have an action for that too that prepares the layers. So as I was telling you, basically it's a sharpen layer, and then we have again a dodge and burn layer. And then we have here an eye detail, and I'll show you what I do on that one, which would be pretty much trying to add a little bit more texture to the eye, but also enhancing the catch light. And so let's get started. I'm just gonna zoom in into the eyes. And what I do right off the bat is just I have this layer, and let me show you what this looks like. I'm gonna invert the mask so you can see it. So it's pretty much this layer, super sharp at 85, soft light. And what I'm gonna do is just paint on this mask with 70% opacity, and I'm gonna paint on top of the eye only. And I'm gonna paint on top of the other eye only. And then my secondary portions of the face that I wanna try to drag a little bit more attention, I'm gonna do 30% opacity, and I'm gonna paint on top of them to try to make it a little bit more sharper than they are naturally. So the eyebrows would be one portion. It would be the tip of the nose. If I feel like my texture under the eyes is a little bit too soft, then I could add a tiny bit in there, and I would add on the lips. and on the chin a tiny bit. So if I turn it on and off, then you can start seeing a little bit of the more detail in the eyes in there. So now the dodge and burn part, that's the fun part now. And I'm just gonna try to use this helper layer to try to explain what I'm gonna try to do. But it's essentially the same technique that we did for the global dodge and burn. But in this case, we're gonna apply that technique to the eyes. But first, it's important for you to actually understand where would you need to dodge and where would you need to burn. So for that, I'm just gonna do this helper layer, and I'm just gonna pick red color. I'm gonna pick blue color, for example. So the light, usually when it hits the eye, it enters where the catch light is pointing. So in this case over here, and it exits just on the opposite side. So usually when this happens, you will have a shadow that's created over here because of the eyelid. So usually this part, even though the light comes in from the catch light, this area is gonna be darker and this area is gonna be lighter. So that's essentially what we're gonna do. Let me do an eraser really quick, or actually do a new one. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna add some light into my eye by doing that exact same technique that we did on the global dodge and burn. So basically what I'm gonna try to do is just, let me exaggerate it really quick with 30%. So I'm gonna hit once, then I'm gonna make it smaller, and I'm gonna start moving down towards where the light goes out, just like I told you. Now that we have this kind of like sphere that's tilted or pointing down, I would essentially, since we're doing it on the mask, I will be removing the adjustment from the iris over here and from where it's supposed to be dark. So you're gonna get your brightness portion, or your dodge portion of the eye should look something like this. And then when I darken, the areas that I'm gonna dark for my image are gonna be pretty much these areas, corners of the eye, and I'll just go ahead and paint over here. So basically that's what we're gonna do. Of course, you're not gonna paint it blue or red. That's just to show you an example so that you can actually see what we're trying to achieve with these two layers, dodge and burn. So let's start with that dodge. The value that you're looking for on your brush is a 30%. So what I'm gonna do is just click once, then I'm gonna make it smaller, twice, 3, 4, 5. So that's what we did. And then I'm gonna paint on with black at 100% to remove the adjustment from the iris and remove it from here. So basically what we end up getting is this light on the eye. So I'm gonna do it now on the other one. So I start with my brush, 30%, and I start big, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I switch to black, opacity 100%, and remove the adjustment from that area. So we get with that. If you feel like you went past the eye, you can remove it from here as well. There you go. Now we're moving to the burn. And for the burn, again, we're gonna paint with white. And for this burn, we're gonna do 30% again. And what I'm gonna do is to paint on here the edges or the eyelid to enhance her makeup a little bit, and then I'm gonna paint here the corner of the eye. Just gonna do it now on the other side. Paint 1, paint 2. Think of these areas of the eye. Finally, I'm just gonna change the value to paint on my eyebrows, and my value is gonna be opacity 100 and flow 10%. The reason why is because, remember, flow, you would use it when you try to build up an adjustment. So in this case, the eyebrows, you don't want like a complete homogeneous adjustment into it. You want some areas to build up. For example, in this one, you maybe want it a little bit darker, or this little space you want it a little bit darker, or these spaces you want it a little bit darker just so that it looks like it's filled. So by using this 10%, I can probably paint 2 or 3 times more than what I'm gonna do on the full eyebrow. So all right, I did those little spaces, and now I'm gonna do one big one. Same goes for the other one. So smaller first in areas that I wanna pretty much fill up, and I'm gonna do a big one. Probably fill up a little bit here. So this is the adjustment that we've made in the eyes so far. As you can see, it's a huge difference. If at some point you feel like it's too much, remember that you can always come here to the opacity level on your layer, and then you can tone it down a little bit. So this detail burn, probably I want to do it like somewhere around 80 or so. I think it would be nice. There you go. Finally, I have this eye detail that I was telling you about, and this is basically an empty layer on an overlay blend mode with opacity at 45%. But what I want to do in there is just, I'm going to start painting. I'm going to do another helper here so you can see what I'm talking about. What I want to do is I'm going to try to do some texturing in the eye, like really, really slight. But basically, what you're gonna see is me making some gibberish here in the eye, oops, with white. So maybe some sort of lines like this. And on her other eye, it's just gonna be, again, like some kind of lines like this. And then at the end, I'm just gonna paint a little bit on top of that catch light to enhance it. All right. So let me delete that and then go to the actual layer. The settings that we want is a normal brush, and we want it on a flow 10%. Again, because we're gonna build up on that one. So I'm just gonna paint with white, and I'm just gonna do some lines in there. And the same on the other one. Now if I turn it on and on, you can see a little bit of that detail, especially on this one. Now what I'm gonna do is that same brush, but now I'm gonna increase my flow to 90%. And with 90%, I'm just gonna paint on that catch light to make it a little bit more bright. So now if I zoom back a little bit and I show you what that adjustment did, it's just adding a little bit of kind of like if it was a texture, which plays really nicely, especially if you're from far away. It adds a little bit more detail on it. But the full folder for this, for the details, now making the eyes pop, this is what the difference make on that specific technique. All right, we're left with one more step. Let me just go back over here and see if we have any other questions. I think we're good. My final step here on my process will be the color grading. And for that, guess what? I also have an action. And on the action, what I have over here is a bunch of layers. All of them are empty. Basically, I have a contrast, I have a color balance, I have a levels, I have an empty layer I have an exposure layer and a brightness layer. So my idea here for my color grading would be to first balance the colors the way that I like it, or my style. I usually lean to having like purplish kind of shadows, and I like to have like bluish or yellowish highlights. So I try to do that on my color balance layer, and then I would enhance shadows or lights with it, and we can use solid colors to try to add a little bit of an overlay or a little bit of a kind of like a filter on it. And in some of the other layers, like the exposure, I will wash out my image a little bit, which is what I like to do with all my edits, so that it feels like it's some sort of like texture, like matte texture to it. So I usually start with this color balance, and this color balance has here a drop down, and it will let you mess with the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. So as I was saying, I usually gravitate to like purplish shadows, and you will do that by moving these sliders right or left so that you can play with them. Of course, not too much, it's just a tiny bit. So in this case, for me, probably around a 10 on the shadows will make that adjustment, and then I will add a little bit of blue probably to it, so that it's like more purplish. Then I would move into the midtones to start trying to do like a transition into more kind of teal colors or yellowish colors, and I'll show you how I do that. On the midtones, I move my midtones a little bit into the cyan and the blue. So it starts creating from purplish to blue to cyan. So imagine like it's a gradient that goes from the shadows to the highlights on those colors. Finally, on the highlights, I'm just gonna do a little bit of the cyan, and I can add a tiny bit more of the yellow. So now if I show you the before and after, hopefully you can see it on the Zoom meeting, but it creates this kind of mood or this kind of balance, color balance that I have in a lot of my photos. That's the way I do it. I have a layer here that's off by default. This is a simple layer. It's like an S curve, which is just adding contrast, so bringing down the darks a little bit and enhancing a little bit of the light. So if I turn it on, just add a little bit of punch into it. You don't have to build your own curve. Actually, if you create a curve, and then you could actually use a preset over here, and you can do linear contrast or medium contrast, and that would do a pretty similar effect. All right, so we took these two layers already, the color balance and the contrast, to create this kind of feel. Then I have a levels, and the levels, I use it to, if I need to have darker blacks, I would push this slider to the right. If I feel like I need like lighter whites, then I can pull this to the left, and you can see what it does. If you wanna darken or lighten the mid tones of this image, then you can push it on the middle. Usually, I think this image already has a really nice tone on the dark colors you can see here in the histogram. So I don't think I would add anything to it in that regards. I would probably add some light into it. So probably from 225 to 240, and that would make the change on it. And I would probably leave it at that. I know it still needs a little bit more light, but we're gonna get to it in a minute. I have these dodge and burn details over here. Probably this is not the image where I would use it. I usually use these dodge and burn details to try to separate a person from the background, especially if I'm shooting outside. So if I wanna separate it from the background, I usually would paint with white on float 10 to make like a silhouette around the person, especially where the light is hitting her or he, in the hair, for example, or on the shoulders, and that's where I would use it. In this case, I don't see a specific point to use it, so I'm gonna skip it by now. But that's usually what I use these for. From here, what I would do now is just to start playing with the skin tones, and I know that a lot of people like to learn how do I do or how do I mess with the skin tones on my photos. And I just do a curves layer. The trick would be how to select the skin on an easier way. And there's a plugin that I use. You can select your skin manually. I like to use this plugin because it gets me pretty close to what I want, and then I can refine it, but this makes a good job. So this plugin is called Lumencia, and what it's gonna do is just select a color and create a mask based on that color. So I usually select like a skin color in this case. I don't think it's doing it, so let me click again on it. Oh, there you go. It was doing it. So I'll do one more time. So pick a color. I'll select this skin color probably over here. And it's just gonna create this adjustment for me. And this is basically a preview of the mask. And then I can come over here and see if that mask would work for me. I can push these sliders all the way over here to try to select my face only. Of course, this one, it's a little bit more challenging because of all the colors that we have on the face. But whenever you're outside, it would do like a really good job trying to separating those different colors, especially where the skin is. So what I would do is I will use it like this, and then I'm gonna modify it manually. But basically on this plugin, once you have a selection that you like, you have a bunch of adjustments over here. I don't know what this gray box is. This usually doesn't show. So basically this is stripping, but these basic adjustments over here will create one of these layers based on the selection that you have. So the one that I like to use is curves. So if I hit on the curves button, it will create a curves adjustment with the mask that we just created. And what I'm gonna do now is just modify the mask so that I get all the skin portion that I wanted, essentially. And it doesn't have to be really perfect because the adjustment is just gonna be like super crazy. Just gonna leave out the eyes portion of it, but you can see here how it selects really nicely the skin only, including the skin that's here on her head covered by this hair. Probably I would come here and select the fingers a tiny bit more. Disregards, there you go. So now that I have that mask going on, I can now play with my curves, and the trick here would be to make my skin a little bit more orange so that we can get richer colors on it. And the way I do it is just to go here in the curves, and I'm gonna play with these two, green and blue. So if I go here on the green curve, if I was to add a point and bring it down, it's just gonna start making my image red, either in the shadows or on the highlights. If I bring it up, it's just gonna make it green. If I bring it down, it's just gonna make it red or magenta. And the blue, what the blue is gonna do, if I add a point, it's just gonna make it orange or yellow. And if I add it up, it's just gonna make it bluish or purple. So what I'm gonna do is a combination of both. And I'm gonna bring down the green, probably like that, and a little bit of the blue, probably like that. And that would essentially give me more rich colors on the skin. So now you saw my selection here on my mask included some portion of the background because this is similar to the skin. So either you can come over here and deselect all of these portions as well. So I can do that pretty quick in here. Roughly, it doesn't have to be super perfect right now, just for example. Let me cover it really quick. So now this layer would be affecting my skin only. So it make the color richer, but I still feel like this image needs a little bit more light. So these curves, again, as we saw on the global Dutch and burn, you know, this is basically on the skin side of things. So if I'm pulling the RGB curve up, it can add a little bit of light to my selection. So I can totally do and try to do that as well to add a little bit more color on it. So now you can still see darker shadows and whatnot. So just to finish it up, I come here on the exposure and we can start playing here with what I'm missing. In this case, I might be missing like probably half a step still. And this other slider that you see over here is the one that I use for washing my image. So this is really, it's really sensitive. So you need to have like a really low value. In this case, I would go from 0.001 to 0.001, somewhere in between. I usually do, let's try 0.005, or I have 2 points in there, 0.078 for example. And what it would do is just to crush the blacks or the shadows a tiny bit, so you can see it here. That's something that I like to do personally. Remember that this color grading, as well as all your retouching, is always subjective. You do it the way you like it. There's not a specific rule on what you need to do or what you don't need to do. Probably I'm gonna add a little bit of brightness to it, and then I'm gonna come back again to the levels, and I feel like the shadows are a little bit too heavy. So I'm gonna go here in the midtones, and I'm gonna bring those a tiny bit. Probably modifying this again. All right, some other cool things that you can do in here probably could be adding a solid color. This would work actually as a filter on your image. So let's say you want like a blue filter on it, you can definitely go into this one and create soft light or an overlay layer, and then you will just bring it like really low, just barely noticeable, to add just a tiny bit of mood into it. So that's how I do color grading. Now you see the before and after we have all of these different layers on it. Pretty dramatic. I like the colors. They look really bright and nice. You can add let me add a saturation on it. Probably 5 points. And there you go. These are my steps on my workflow. As you can see, we did frequency separation, we did local Dutch and burn, we did global Dutch and burn, we play with the details on the eyes, on the lips, on the texture, and then we went bananas with the toning and the color grading. So there are many adjustments that you can do, many techniques. I know we did this curves like really fast. If you are interested in diving a little bit more, you're more than welcome to send me a message and we can talk about it. I do one-on-ones for this kind of stuff as well, where I can work at whatever level of Photoshop or Capture One you're at, and we can make it work. But I appreciate your time here. I really thankful for you being here and seeing all my process. I take these steps, I apply these steps on most of my on all of my images actually. These 5 steps, it usually takes me about 20 to 25 minutes to retouch an image, and this is the final product that I would usually give to my clients. So just to grab the session, let me see if there's any question in here. I think I'm gonna give like a minute or two to see if anyone has any questions. We'll probably just group all of these so I can do an easier retouch. before and after. So that's before, and that's the after. Before and after. So now zooming in. Of course you don't like it. Zooming in, and I'll show you again before and after, before and after. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Good job. Thanks, Duke. I think I have here. Great editing. Thanks for sharing. Questions on the lights you used. Love the blue tones. Oh, I would need to send me a message on my Instagram, and I would definitely show you behind the scenes where I have the lights. There are lights like the ones that you can see behind me. I just play with it like orange, blue, magenta, and yeah. These guys here in Maker's Gym can do all of these without those. Where are the maxes at? In my Photoshop. Actions here, they are not available now. Of course, I build all of these my own, hand built. If you guys take a one-on-one with me, I give these actions away so you can have them and you can use them for sure. All right. Well, thank you everyone again. Thanks to Maker's Gym for hosting. I hope you guys had a great time. I hope you guys really enjoyed this process, and I hope you can apply any or all of the things that I talked about on this live streaming. So thank you.